But let me take you back to where this really started. In the Chin household, order was everything. My father, Henry Chin, had emigrated from Taiwan at 19 with $200 in his pocket and built a successful accounting practice through sheer discipline and sacrifice. My mother, Grace, had supported him every step of the way, managing their home with military precision while raising 3 children to meet impossibly high standards. My older brother, Michael, was the crown jewel. Valedictorian. Stanford Medical School. Now a cardiologist at Johns Hopkins pulling $600,000 a year. My younger sister, Rebecca, followed the approved path with minor variations. Berkeley Law School. Partner track at a prestigious firm in San Francisco. Then there was me, Lily. The middle child. The problem. I didn't fail by normal standards. I graduated from UCLA with a degree in computer science. I held jobs at recognizable companies. I paid my bills on time and never asked my parents for money. But in the Chin family, meeting normal standards was failure. Michael bought a house at 30. Rebecca made partner at 32. I was 34 and renting an apartment in Portland, working for what my parents called some startup nobody's heard of. Lily can't commit to anything, Mom would tell relatives at family gatherings. New job every 2 years. No husband. No house. No direction. Dad was more direct. She's irresponsible. Always has been. Some children just don't have the discipline. They didn't know that my job hopping was actually strategic equity accumulation across 4 successful startups. They didn't know that my Portland apartment was a choice, not a necessity. They didn't know that I'd been quietly building a financial portfolio that would have shocked them into silence. They never asked. And I never told. My career path looked chaotic from the outside. 2 years at a fintech company. 18 months at a healthcare startup. 2 years at an e-commerce platform. Another 2 at a logistics company. What my parents saw was instability. What I saw was opportunity. Each company I joined was pre-IPO, each offered significant equity packages, and each had the fundamentals I'd learned to recognize as indicators of future success. I wasn't job hopping. I was building a diversified portfolio of startup equity while collecting salaries that increased with each move. The fintech company went public in 2019. My shares were worth $340,000. The healthcare startup was acquired in 2020. My payout was $520,000. The e-commerce platform IPO'd during the pandemic boom. I cashed out $890,000. The logistics company was still private, but my vested shares were valued at approximately $1.2 million based on the last funding round. By Thanksgiving of last year, my net worth was approximately $3.1 million. I was 34 years old, financially independent and utterly invisible to my family. Michael had more income but also a $2.3 million mortgage, 3 kids in private school, and a lifestyle that consumed every dollar he earned. Rebecca was still paying off law school debt and working 80-hour weeks to justify her partnership salary. I worked 40 hours a week, owned nothing I didn't want to own, and could have retired that afternoon if I'd chosen to. But my parents saw only the surface. The rental apartment, the modest car, the lack of impressive titles. And they drew their conclusions accordingly. The truth about my parents' finances came out 3 years ago, during a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I'd arrived early for Michael's birthday dinner and let myself in through the back door. Mom and Dad were in the kitchen, voices low but intense, discussing something that clearly wasn't meant for children's ears. The bank called again, Mom was saying. They're going to foreclose if we miss another payment. I know, Grace. I'm aware. How did we get here? We've worked so hard. The market crashed. The rental properties lost value. The tenants stopped paying. It happens. What are we going to tell the children? Nothing. We tell them nothing. I'll figure something out. I slipped back outside and pretended to arrive 10 minutes later, full of cheerful birthday wishes and no indication that I'd heard anything. But I had heard. And I spent the next week investigating. What I discovered was worse than I'd imagined. My parents had invested heavily in rental properties during the 2000s, leveraging their home equity to acquire 4 additional units. For years the strategy worked beautifully. Then came the financial crisis, the slow recovery, a series of bad tenants, and finally the pandemic. They'd refinanced their primary residence twice, pulling out equity to cover shortfalls in their rental portfolio. Now they owed $580,000 on a house worth $620,000, with rental properties that were underwater and generating negative cash flow. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage. The bank had issued a formal notice of default. Henry Chin, the man who'd built an accounting practice on financial discipline, was 90 days from losing his home. And his pride wouldn't let him ask anyone for help. I could have confronted them directly. Could have offered to pay off their arrears and stabilize their situation. But I knew how that conversation would go. They'd be humiliated. They'd refuse my help out of pride. They'd find some way to make my assistance into evidence of their failure rather than my success. So I took a different approach. Through my financial advisor, I established a relationship with Pacific Northwest Federal Credit Union, the institution that held my parents' mortgage. I proposed an unusual arrangement. I would personally guarantee the Chin residence loan, bringing the account current and providing the bank with security against future default. In exchange for this guarantee, the bank would restructure the loan terms, extending the repayment period and reducing the monthly payment to something my parents could actually afford. The guarantee would remain anonymous. My parents would be informed that a private investor had taken an interest in their loan as part of a community development initiative. The bank agreed. From their perspective, they were getting a guarantee from someone with $3 million in liquid assets on a loan that was headed for foreclosure. The risk-reward was obvious. The total exposure of my guarantee was $340,000, the remaining balance on my parents' mortgage after their partial payments and the restructuring. If they defaulted, I'd be responsible for the full amount. If they kept paying, I'd simply remain an invisible safety net. 3 weeks after I signed the guarantee documents, my father received a letter from the bank informing him that his loan had been selected for a special restructuring program. The arrears had been cleared. The terms had been improved. The foreclosure notice had been withdrawn. Dad called Michael to celebrate the good news, attributing the turnaround to his own financial acumen and the bank's recognition of his long customer history. "Sometimes you just have to wait these things out," he told Michael proudly. "The bank knows I'm good for it. They've seen my record." He didn't call me. I heard about it secondhand through Rebecca. For 3 years I maintained my guarantee on my parents' mortgage. Every month, the bank sent me statements showing their payment status. Every month, I watched my parents rebuild their financial stability on a foundation I'd secretly provided. During those 3 years, the family dynamic remained unchanged. Michael was celebrated. At every gathering for his medical achievements, his beautiful family, his new beach house. Rebecca was praised for making partner, for her engagement to a tech executive, for being featured in a legal industry publication. I was tolerated. Asked when I'd settle down. Questioned about my job stability. Reminded that I wasn't getting any younger and that my biological clock was ticking. Mom would sometimes pat my hand sympathetically and say, "Not everyone is meant for big success, Lily. Some people just have to find their own small happiness." I'd nod and say nothing, thinking about the $340,000 guarantee that was keeping her roof over her head. Dad was worse. He'd use me as a cautionary tale when giving advice to younger relatives. "Don't be like your cousin Lily," I overheard him telling my nephew at a family reunion. "Always chasing the next thing. Never building anything real. You need stability in life. Discipline." I excused myself and checked my portfolio on my phone. The logistics company had just announced a funding round that valued my shares at $1.4 million. I put the phone away and rejoined the party, playing my role as the family disappointment. Last Thanksgiving was hosted at my parents' house, the same house I was secretly guaranteeing. 23 people crowded into the dining room and living room, 3 generations of Chens gathering to celebrate gratitude and family. The day started fine. Turkey was prepared. Football was watched. Children ran through the house while adults exchanged pleasantries and caught up on the past year. Then came dinner. Michael shared news of his latest publication, a study that had been featured in a major cardiology journal. Rebecca announced that she was being considered for a judgeship, a fast-track appointment that would make her one of the youngest judges in California history. When the spotlight finally reached me, I mentioned that my company had just closed a Series C round and was expanding into new markets. "What company is that again?" Dad asked, his tone suggesting he didn't expect the answer to be worth remembering. "Nexus Logistics. We're revolutionizing last-mile delivery." "Never heard of it," Michael said. That's because it's not public yet. We're still in the growth phase. Mom shook her head sympathetically. Another startup. Lily, when are you going to find something stable? A real job. My job is real. We have 400 employees and $200 million in revenue. But no job security, Dad countered. Startups fail all the time. You could be unemployed tomorrow. I have savings. I'd be fine. Dad laughed, not kindly. Savings? From jumping between jobs every 2 years? I doubt that. I felt the familiar tension rising but kept my voice calm. You might be surprised. That's when Dad decided to make an example of me. Let me tell you something, he announced, addressing the room. I've built 2 successful businesses in this country. I know what it takes. Discipline. Commitment. Staying power. Lily has never had those qualities. Mom nodded along. You're the irresponsible one, Dad declared, pointing his fork at me. Can't even hold a steady job. While your brother and sister built careers, you've been floating around playing pretend businesswoman. Pathetic, Mom added, the word landing like a slap. The room went quiet. 23 pairs of eyes shifted between my parents and me, waiting to see how I'd respond. 20 years ago I would have argued. 10 years ago I would have cried. Now I just felt tired. Tired of performing failure for people who needed me to be less than them. Tired of hiding success from people who wouldn't celebrate it anyway. Tired of protecting parents who used every opportunity to diminish me. Fair enough, I replied. I excused myself from the table and walked out to the back porch. The November air was cold, but I barely noticed. I pulled out my phone and called Pacific Northwest Federal Credit Union. This is Lily Chin. I need to speak with someone in the commercial lending department about the guarantee on account number ending in 4847. 3 minutes later, I was connected to the officer who'd processed my original agreement. Miss Chin, how can I help you? I want to remove my name as guarantor on the Chin residence loan. Effective immediately. I understand. Are you aware that this will trigger a review of the loan terms? The original restructuring was contingent on your guarantee. I'm aware. The bank will likely revert to the previous terms, which would make the current payment amount insufficient. The borrowers would receive notice of the change within the hour, I know. Please proceed. Very well. I'm processing the removal now. The notification to the borrowers will be sent immediately. Is there anything else? No. Thank you. I hung up and looked through the window at my family, still seated around the Thanksgiving table, probably already moving on to the next topic. 18 minutes later, my father's phone rang. Dad ignored the first ring, then the second. By the third, Mom was giving him meaningful looks, so he excused himself and stepped into the kitchen. I remained on the porch, watching through the window as his posture changed. Relaxed to confused. Confused to alarmed. Alarmed to something approaching panic. He returned to the dining room, face ashen. What's wrong? Mom asked. The bank. Something about our mortgage. The guarantee was removed. What guarantee? I don't know. They said a private guarantor has terminated their agreement. We need to make a $12,000 payment by December 15th or the original terms are reinstated. $12,000? By December? We don't have that kind of. Dad held up his hand, silencing her. We'll discuss this later. But the damage was done. The table had heard. Michael and Rebecca exchanged worried glances. Aunts and uncles murmured among themselves. What's a private guarantor? Aunt Susan asked. Who is guaranteeing your mortgage? Dad's jaw tightened. I have no idea. The bank said it was part of some community program. I never asked questions because the terms were favorable. Someone was paying to secure your loan? Michael looked incredulous. Dad, that's a significant financial commitment. Who would do that without telling you? Every eye in the room turned toward me. I was still standing by the window, having re-entered during the confusion. Lily, Rebecca said slowly. You work in finance. Do you know anything about this? I met my father's eyes across the room. Yes, I said. I know everything about it. The room erupted. Questions from every direction. Demands for explanation. Dad's face shifting from confusion to disbelief to fury. I held up my hand and slowly the chaos subsided. 3 years ago I overheard Mom and Dad discussing their mortgage. They were 3 months behind. The bank was threatening foreclosure. Dad was trying to figure out how to fix it without telling anyone. You were eavesdropping? Mom's voice was sharp. I arrived early for Michael's birthday. I heard what I heard. And I decided to help. Help how? Dad demanded. I contacted the bank and offered to personally guarantee your loan. I brought your account current. I provided the security the bank needed to restructure your terms. I've been backing your mortgage for 3 years. That's impossible, Dad said. You don't have that kind of money. I have $3.1 million in liquid assets. The guarantee is for $340,000. It represents about 11% of my portfolio. Silence. Complete absolute silence. That's not possible, Michael said. You work at startups. You rent an apartment. I've worked at 4 startups that either went public or were acquired. Each one paid me significant equity. The apartment is a choice. I own property in Portland that I rent out for income. You're lying, Mom said. This is some kind of joke. I pulled out my phone and handed it to my father. On the screen was my investment portfolio showing holdings, balances, and account history. He scrolled through it slowly, his face draining of color. This is real, he said finally. Yes. You've had this kind of money for years. Yes. And you never told us. No. Why? I took a breath, steadying myself for the hardest part. Because I knew how you'd react. You've spent my entire life telling me I'm irresponsible. That I can't commit. That I don't have discipline. If I'd told you about my success, you would have found a way to diminish it. You would have compared me to Michael and Rebecca and found me lacking somehow. You would have turned my achievements into evidence of luck instead of skill. That's not fair, Mom protested. 20 minutes ago you called me pathetic. At your own Thanksgiving table. In front of the entire family. While I was guaranteeing $340,000 of your debt. How is anything I'm saying unfair? Mom looked away. I helped you because you're my parents and you were going to lose your home. I kept it secret because I knew you'd never accept help from the daughter you consider a failure. And I'm ending the guarantee now because I'm done. Done with what? Dad asked. Done hiding. Done pretending to be less than I am so you can feel better about your judgments. Done protecting people who can't say a single kind word about me even when I'm literally keeping their roof over their heads. I picked up my coat from the back of a chair. The bank will give you 30 days to either find alternative financing or make the accelerated payment. I suggest you start making calls. Lily, wait. Michael stood up. You can't just leave them in this situation. I'm not leaving them in anything. I'm removing myself from it. There's a difference. There are parents. They're your parents when you want praise and my parents when you need someone to blame. I've been carrying this family's judgment for 34 years. I'm putting it down. I walked toward the door. Lily. Dad's voice stopped me. I didn't know. I know you didn't. That's the problem. You never knew because you never looked. You decided who I was when I was 18 and never updated your assumptions. Even now, even seeing the proof, your first instinct was to call me a liar. I opened the door. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. The weeks after Thanksgiving were chaos for my parents. The bank's letter arrived 3 days later, formally notifying them that their loan terms were reverting to the original agreement. The monthly payment nearly doubled. The arrears that I'd cleared 3 years ago were irrelevant now, but the new payment schedule was beyond their ability to manage. Dad called Michael first, of course. Michael couldn't help. His income was high but his expenses were higher and he had nothing liquid to offer. Rebecca was next. She was in the middle of partnership buy-in obligations and couldn't spare anything significant. Then finally Dad called me. Lily. We need to talk. I'm listening. Can you reinstate the guarantee? We'll pay you back. We'll sign whatever agreement you want. No. Please. I'm asking you as your father. The same father who called me irresponsible at Thanksgiving? Who let Mom call me pathetic while I was secretly supporting you? That father. Silence on the line. I'm sorry, he said finally. I was wrong. You were. But that's not why I'm saying no. Then why? Because reinstating the guarantee solves your immediate problem but doesn't change anything. You'll go back to seeing me as the backup plan. The safety net you don't have to acknowledge. I won't be that anymore. What do you want from me? I want you to figure this out on your own. I want you to experience what it's like to face a financial crisis without a secret benefactor making it disappear. I want you to understand that I was never the irresponsible one. I was just the one you never bothered to see clearly. And if we lose the house, then you'll move into something smaller and rebuild. The way I've been rebuilding my entire life while you counted me out. I hung up. My parents didn't lose the house. They sold 2 of their rental properties, taking losses but generating enough cash to cover the accelerated payments. They refinanced through a different institution at market rates. They downsized their lifestyle significantly, selling mom's car and canceling the country club membership they'd maintained for appearances. It took 6 months, but they stabilized on their own. During those 6 months, something unexpected happened. Dad started asking questions. Not demands or criticisms. Actual questions. About my career. About my investment strategy. About how I'd built what I'd built without anyone noticing. I don't understand how you did it, he admitted during a phone call in March. The numbers. The timing. The patience. You never asked before. I know. I should have. Mom was slower to come around. Her pride had been wounded in a way that was harder to heal. But gradually she began reaching out. Small texts at first. Then phone calls. Then an invitation to lunch, just the 2 of us. I owe you an apology, she said over dim sum at her favorite restaurant. Not just for Thanksgiving. 4 years of making you feel less than. Why did you? She was quiet for a moment. Because you scared me. You didn't follow the path we set out. You made choices I didn't understand. And when I don't understand something, I assume it's wrong. That's not an excuse. No, it's not. It's just the truth. She reached across the table and took my hand. You were never pathetic, Lily. I was pathetic for not seeing who you really were. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a start. This Thanksgiving was different. The gathering was smaller, just immediate family at Rebecca's new house in San Francisco. No extended relatives. No performances. No hierarchy of achievements to maintain. When my turn came to share what I was grateful for, I didn't mention my portfolio or my career. Instead, I talked about the past year. I'm grateful for second chances, I said. For the opportunity to be seen clearly. For parents who finally asked questions instead of making assumptions. For a family that's learning to be honest with each other. Dad raised his glass. I'm grateful for a daughter who was strong enough to walk away and compassionate enough to leave the door open. Mom added, I'm grateful that my children are teaching me to be better. Even when those lessons are painful. After dinner, Dad pulled me aside. I have something for you. He handed me a check. $340,000. What's this? The guarantee. What you protected us with for 3 years. I told you I never actually lost the money. I just removed the guarantee. I know. But you risked it for us. You put $340,000 on the line for parents who didn't deserve it. I want you to have it anyway. Dad, you can't afford this. We sold the lake cabin. The one your grandfather built. I stared at him. That cabin had been in the family for 40 years. Dad had spent every summer there as a child. He'd proposed to Mom on its porch. I can't accept this. You can. And you will. His voice cracked slightly. Because it's not about the money. It's about acknowledgement. You saved us, Lily. You saved us and we treated you like a failure. This is the only way I know how to show you that I understand what you did. What it cost you. How wrong I was. I looked at the check, then at my father. Thank you. He hugged me. The first real hug I could remember in years. I'm proud of you, he whispered. I should have said that a long time ago. People ask me sometimes if I regret removing the guarantee. If I was too harsh. If I should have found a gentler way to force the confrontation. The answer is no. For 34 years I played the role my family assigned me. The scattered one. The uncommitted one. The irresponsible one. I built a fortune in secret because I didn't trust them to acknowledge it. I supported them anonymously because I knew they'd never accept help from the daughter they designated as a failure. That's not family. That's performance. Real family requires seeing each other clearly. Accepting each other honestly. Celebrating successes without competition and supporting failures without judgment. My parents couldn't do that while they clung to their assumptions about me. They needed those assumptions challenged. They needed to face the consequences of their judgments. They needed to lose the safety net before they could appreciate who had been holding it. The $340,000 guarantee was never really about money. It was about love. The kind of love that gives without recognition. The kind of love that protects without acknowledgement. The kind of love that eventually demands to be seen. When I removed that guarantee, I wasn't punishing my parents. I was freeing both of us. Freeing them from a secret support system that let them maintain their delusions. Freeing myself from a pattern of invisible sacrifice that was never going to earn their respect. The price of that freedom was a difficult year. For them, financial struggle and forced adaptation. For me, guilt and uncertainty and the fear that I'd done irreparable damage. But the result was something better than what we had before. A family that knows each other now. That asks questions instead of making assumptions. That acknowledges contributions instead of dismissing them. Last month I got a call from my father. Not for advice or money. Just a talk. I read an article about your company, he said. The Series D announcement. They mentioned you by name as one of the founding team members. You read tech news now? I set up a Google alert for Nexus Logistics. And for your name. I laughed. Dad, that's almost stalking. It's interest. Long overdue interest. He paused. The article said the company is valued at $2 billion now. Is that right? That's right. And your stake? Significant. I don't need numbers. I wanted to tell you that I understand now. The job hopping. The equity strategy. The patience. You weren't being irresponsible. You were being strategic. More strategic than I've ever been. Thank you for saying that. I should have said it years ago. I should have asked questions instead of making judgments. I should have. His voice caught. I should have been your father instead of your critic. You're being my father now. That matters. Does it? It does. I promise. We talked for another hour. About business, about family, about the years we'd lost to misunderstanding. It wasn't perfect. The scars don't heal overnight. But it was honest. And honesty, I've learned, is where family actually begins. Dad ended the call with something he'd never said before. I love you, Lily. Not because of what you've built. Not because of your success. Just because you're my daughter. I should have made that clear a long time ago. I love you too, Dad. I'll do better. I promise. I know you will. I hung up and looked out at the Portland skyline from my apartment. The apartment I chose, not the one I was stuck with. The life I built, not the one I was assigned. For 34 years I was the irresponsible one. Now I'm just Lily. Daughter, sister, investor, human being. That's enough. That's finally enough.